In the early 2000s, Avril Lavigne wasn't just another pop star, she was the face of rebellion. The pop-punk princess who made baggy pants, neckties, and skateboards mainstream. Her voice blared from every radio. Her attitude defined a generation. And her songs became anthems of teenage defiance. But almost as quickly as she rose to the top, she disappeared from the spotlight, leaving millions of fans wondering, how did the unstoppable Avril Lavigne suddenly vanish? Avril Ramona Lavigne was born on September 27 in Belleville, Ontario, Canada, and grew up in the small town of Napanee. Her childhood was not marked by glamour or privilege. She was the daughter of a technician father and a homemaker mother, raised in a modest household where music became her escape. From the time she could speak, Avril was singing at church, at school, talent shows, anywhere she could get a chance to perform. Her parents recognized her potential early and supported her passion, buying her a microphone, a drum kit, a keyboard, and eventually a guitar. This wasn't just a hobby for Avril. It became her identity. By the time she was a teenager, Avril had begun writing her own songs. She taught herself guitar at the age of 14 and was soon crafting melodies that reflected her restless, rebellious spirit. Unlike the polished pop acts dominating the charts in the late 1990s, Avril gravitated toward rawer sound spunk, alternative rock, and bands that carried a certain don't care attitude. She wasn't interested in being the next Britney Spears. She wanted to carve out her own path. Her first big break came in '99 when she won a radio contest to perform on stage with Canadian country star Shania Twain. At just 15 years old, Avril was already proving she had both the voice and the charisma to command a massive audience. This performance brought her confidence, but also a vision of what her future could hold. She wasn't just dreaming about being a star, she was chasing it. That same year, her undeniable talent caught the attention of music manager Cliff Fabry, who began shopping her demo tapes around the industry. By 2000, she had signed a deal with Arista Records, under the legendary Clive Davis's guidance. At only 16, Avril packed up her life in Napanee and moved to New York City to begin working on her debut album. It was a drastic change from a sleepy small town to the chaos of the music industry, but Avril thrived on the challenge. Her journey wasn't without resistance. Record executives initially wanted to mold her into another typical pop act, but Avril fought back. She insisted on keeping her own style, her own sound, her own voice. She wore skater clothes instead of glittery dresses, sang about real frustrations instead of love ballads, and pushed back against the pop princess stereotype. That rebellious authenticity set her apart. The turning point came in 2002 when she released her debut album, Let Go. Fueled by hits like Complicated, Skater Boy, and I'm With You, the album became an instant global sensation. Avril was only 17, but she was suddenly one of the most talked about artists in the world. Her image, baggy pants, tank tops, Converse sneakers, and a necktie became a cultural phenomenon. She wasn't just making music, she was creating a movement. For millions of young fans who didn't fit into the glossy world of early 2000s pop, Avril represented something different. She was edgy, real, and unapologetic. She gave a voice to teenagers who felt misunderstood, and her rise felt like a revolution against the polished, manufactured pop machine. Within months, Avril Lavigne went from a small-town Canadian girl with a guitar to the face of a global youth rebellion. By the mid-2000s, Avril Lavigne was no longer just a breakout star, she was a global icon. Her debut album, Let Go, had sold over 16 million copies worldwide, cementing her as one of the most successful female artists of her generation. Complicated hit #1 in multiple countries. Skater Boy turned into a generational anthem. And I'm With You showed a softer, more emotional side of her artistry. Each track carved out a unique space for Avril, making her stand apart in a crowded industry dominated by bubblegum pop. Her image became as influential as her music. In a world where female pop stars were often styled to be glamorous and flawless, Avril's casual, skater-inspired look was revolutionary. The baggy cargo pants, tank tops, Converse sneakers, and neckties were not just fashion choices, they became symbols of a movement. Teenagers around the world copied her style, and retail stores scrambled to stock clothing that mimicked the Avril aesthetic. She didn't just top charts, she rewrote what it meant to be a pop star. In 2004, she released her sophomore album, Under My Skin. If Let Go was her declaration of independence, Under My Skin was proof of her staying power. Songs like My Happy Ending and Nobody's Home struck a darker, more mature tone, resonating deeply with fans who were growing up alongside her. The album debuted at #1 in multiple countries, including the US, and sold over 10 million copies worldwide. For a moment, Avril wasn't just a star, she was unstoppable. Her tours during this era became spectacles of raw energy. Fans packed arenas across North America, Europe, and Asia, chanting every lyric as if they were living out their own stories through her songs. Critics who once doubted her authenticity were forced to admit that Avril was more than a teen fad. She was a serious artist with a powerful connection to her audience. But it wasn't only music where Avril's presence was felt. She became a cultural force. Magazines dubbed her the pop-punk princess, a title that stuck and defined her career. She influenced an entire wave of young female musicians who followed in her footsteps, from Paramore's Hayley Williams to Kelly Clarkson, embracing edgier aesthetics. Even mainstream fashion houses began incorporating punk-inspired elements into their designs, thanks to Avril's impact. By 2007, Avril had reached what many consider the absolute pinnacle of her career. Her third album, The Best Damn Thing, featured the explosive single Girlfriend. The song was a juggernaut, topping charts in over 20 countries and becoming the first music video on YouTube to reach 100 million views. At a time when digital media was reshaping the industry, Avril was at the forefront, proving she could adapt and dominate. Girlfriend also marked a shift in Avril's image from the rebellious skater girl to a bolder, more colorful, almost cheerleader-like persona. Some fans were surprised by the change, but the commercial success is undeniable. She had achieved something rare, staying relevant through reinvention while still carrying the rebellious DNA that made her famous. At her peak, Avril wasn't just selling records. She was shaping the cultural conversation. She became a household name, invited to perform at major award shows, featured in countless magazine covers, and interviewed by nearly every major media outlet. She had Grammy nominations, MTV awards, and global recognition. For millions, she embodied both authenticity and success, proving that you could be yourself and still conquer the world during these years. Avril Lavigne was untouchable, the voice of a generation, a trendsetter, and one of the most powerful female artists on the planet. The girl from Napanee had climbed to the summit of global stardom, and it seemed like nothing could stop her. For every meteoric rise in the music industry, there often comes a turning point, a moment when the spotlight begins to dim. For Avril Lavigne, that turning point arrived quietly, almost invisibly at first. After the global triumph of The Best Damn Thing in 2007, cracks began to appear beneath the glittering surface of her career. The music landscape was shifting. The late 2000s ushered in a new era dominated by dance pop and electronic sounds, led by artists like Lady Gaga, Rihanna, and Katy Perry. Avril's pop-punk formula, once fresh and rebellious, suddenly felt out of step with mainstream trends. Her attempts to keep pace came with mixed results. While singles like What the Hell in 2011 had commercial success, they no longer carried the cultural weight of her earlier hits. The rebellious skater girl persona that once defined her now seemed trapped in the early 2000s. Compounding the problem were personal struggles. Avril went through a highly publicized divorce from Derek Whibley, frontman of Sum 41, in 2010. The end of their marriage brought an avalanche of tabloid attention, overshadowing her music. Headlines focused less on her artistry and more on her personal drama. Her subsequent marriage to Chad Kroeger of Nickelback became another target for media mockery, fueling internet jokes rather than respect. On top of that, rumors swirled about her health. In the early 2010s, Avril began quietly battling Lyme disease, though she didn't go public with her diagnosis until 2015, and the illness drained her energy, limited her ability to tour, and made recording new music a struggle. For fans, her absence was noticeable. For critics, her career seemed to be unraveling. Then came one of the strangest moments in modern pop culture, the conspiracy theory that Avril Lavigne had died and been replaced by a lookalike named Melissa. What began as an internet joke spiraled into viral rumor, with countless blogs dissecting her changing appearance and lyrical themes. Though completely unfounded, the theory became so widespread that it overshadowed discussions of her actual music. Instead of being remembered as a trailblazing artist, Avril was reduced to a bizarre meme. By the early 2010s, the pop-punk princess who once ruled the charts was fading from the spotlight. She was still releasing albums, but they no longer captured the cultural zeitgeist. The world had moved on, and Avril was caught between reinvention and nostalgia. The fall wasn't marked by a single scandal or collapse. It was death by 1,000 cuts, changing trends, personal turmoil, illness, and the cruel churn of the entertainment machine. When Avril Lavigne finally went public about her battle with Lyme disease in 2015, it cast a new light on her years of absence. She revealed that, at her worst, she had been bedridden for months, barely able to move or sing. For fans, the confession explained why their idol had vanished from tours and headlines. For Avril, it was both a moment of vulnerability and an attempt to reclaim her story. But by then, the damage to her career was already visible. The momentum that had once propelled her into arenas and global charts was gone. While she released her self-titled album in 2013, featuring songs like Here's to Never Growing Up, the record failed to achieve the massive success of her earlier work. It debuted decently on the charts but quickly faded, receiving lukewarm reviews. Without the ability to tour extensively due to her health, Avril could not promote the album at the scale her career once demanded. Meanwhile, the music industry continued to evolve at breakneck speed. New stars emerged. Trends shifted toward hip-hop and electronic-infused pop, and streaming platforms began reshaping how audiences consume music. In this new environment, Avril's sound seemed increasingly anchored to an earlier time 0.95s. For younger listeners, she was a nostalgic name, not a present force. Her retreat from the spotlight also reshaped her image. Instead of being seen as the fierce, rebellious pop-punk princess, Avril became associated with silence, speculation, and the strange conspiracy theories that refused to die. The internet still buzzed with jokes about Melissa, while her actual music received far less attention. It was a cruel twist for someone who had once defined an entire generation's taste in fashion and sound. Even her comeback attempts felt haunted by the weight of her absence. When she released Head Above Water in 2019, the album was deeply personal, inspired by her battle with illness and her fight to survive. Critics praised the honesty, and fans welcomed her return. But commercially, the record struggled. The Avril who once ruled at MTV now faced an industry dominated by TikTok, streaming algorithms, and a different breed of pop stars. For longtime fans, the aftermath of her disappearance was bittersweet. They remained loyal, filling comment sections with memories of how her songs had shaped their adolescence. But even they recognized that Avril was no longer the global force she had once been. She was an artist with a legacy, time-long 6'5s, not a frontrunner of the present. The disappearance of Avril Lavigne from the cultural spotlight wasn't sudden, it was gradual, like watching a star fade in the night sky. By the mid-2010s, her name no longer commanded headlines. Her songs no longer defined radio playlists. And her image had shifted from icon of rebellion to a quiet survivor of illness and wheelchair. Today, Avril Lavigne lives in a very different world than the one she once ruled. The pop-punk princess of the early 2000s is no longer at the center of cultural conversation, but she remains present steadily, quietly, and with a sense of survival that resonates deeply with her most loyal fans. After the release of Head Above Water in 2019, Avril spoke openly about how Lyme disease had nearly taken her life. She described moments of praying not to die, of feeling her body shut down, and of channeling those experiences into her music. The title track, a soaring ballad about fighting to breathe, became both an anthem for her and for fans who had endured their own struggles. Though the album didn't dominate the charts, it reaffirmed Avril's authenticity as an artist who wrote from lived experience rather than chasing fleeting trends. In the years that followed, Avril began to re-embrace the world she helped create. The early 2020s saw a revival of pop punk, with artists like Machine Gun Kelly, Olivia Rodrigo, and Willow Smith drawing heavily on the very blueprint Avril had pioneered 2 decades earlier. Suddenly, the style that once made her seem outdated was back in vogue, and Avril found herself in the role of both pioneer and mentor. She collaborated with Machine Gun Kelly and Travis Barker, appeared on tracks that reignited nostalgia, and performed at festivals where young fans sang along to songs released before they were even born. In Uppy 2, she released Love Sucks, an album that leaned unapologetically back into her pop-punk roots. With production from Travis Barker and features from artists connected to the genre's resurgence, the record felt like a full-circle moment. It was as if Avril had reclaimed her identity, not by reinventing herself to fit trends, but by doubling down on the sound that made her famous in the first place. Critics recognized it as her most energized project in years, and longtime fans embraced it as proof that Avril still had fire left in her. Outside of music, Avril has crafted a more grounded life. She's active in philanthropy through the Avril Lavigne Foundation, Time, 0.65s, which supports people with Lyme disease and other serious illnesses. She maintains a presence on social media, where she mixes glimpses of her personal life with promotion for her music. While she is no longer tabloid fodder, she has found a balance between fame and privacy, a space where she can be both a musician and a human being. Her relationships, once splashed across headlines, are now approached with more discretion. She has had public romances, but the frenzy around her personal life has diminished, leaving her free to shape her own narrative. To many fans, this quieter Avril is more relatable than ever, a survivor who has weathered both personal storms and the unforgiving cycles of fame. What stands out most in Avril's present is not her absence, but her endurance. Few artists who peak as young as she did are able to sustain any kind of career decades later. Yet Avril remains, not as the dominant voice of the radio, but as a cultural fixture, a reminder of a time when pop-punk ruled and as proof that authenticity can outlast trends. For the millions who grew up with her music, seeing Avril still performing, still releasing albums, and still embracing her identity feels like closure to a story that once seemed tragically unfinished. She may never again command the spotlight as she once did, But Avril Lavigne has carved out something more meaningful: longevity, resilience, and a place in music history that no conspiracy theory or shifting trend can erase. Avril Lavigne's story is not just the rise and fall of a pop star. It's a mirror reflecting how brutal and unpredictable the music industry can be. She went from being the face of a generation to vanishing from the spotlight, not because of a single scandal, but because of the merciless churn of trends, personal battles, and the fragility of health. Yet her journey reminds us that disappearing from the charts does not mean disappearing from history. The legacy of Avril Lavigne is written in the voices of millions who once blasted Complicated from their bedroom stereos, who tied neckties over tank tops to feel rebellious, and who found solace in her lyrics when they felt misunderstood. Even as her fame dimmed, her impact endured. The resurgence of pop punk in today's music scene is proof that what she pioneered never truly died. It simply waited for a new generation to rediscover. Her resilience also offers a deeper lesson. Avril didn't allow illness, gossip, or cultural shifts to erase her. Instead, she reshaped her career on her own terms, embracing philanthropy, authenticity, and survival. In doing so, she showed that there is life beyond the spotlight, that an artist's worth isn't only measured by #1 hits, but by the ability to connect, inspire, and endure. And maybe that's why her story continues to fascinate. Because Avril's tale isn't just about fame. It's about what happens when fame fades. It's about a human being who stumbled, disappeared, but never gave up. For those who grew up with her music, and for those just discovering her now, the question lingers: what do we really value in our idols, their peak moments, or their ability to survive long after the spotlight has moved on?